Alright, in today's video we are going to talk about why I quit this, or let's put it better, why I decided to pivot the content of this channel. Any other creator who's struggling with the misdirection might find this video useful as well. Also, I think it will be useful for my audience to understand where the channel is going and why I haven't released anything lately. Here I'm going to speak about some data, of course. By primarily, I will be focusing on the reasons, the creative struggle, and the reality check of the new channels. Maybe not only applicable for the wargaming community, but in general to everyone. Some time ago, probably I think in 2023, somewhere around the middle of the year, I decided to come back to the YouTube. And by saying come back, I mean that I had some previous experience and projects I was working on in the past. I came back to literally make myself accountable for any creative process. I understand that it sounds a little bit overthought, but at some point in life I realized that if I make my creative workflow public, I kind of hold myself within certain boundaries, because there is a public which is actually watching my work and able to comment on what I'm doing. And I don't just put stuff on the shelf, just leave it be, but I release it, and this kind of finds the artistic expression, kind of that. However, the main topic of this was not that I ended up with, on the channel overall. I'm going to cover the pivot idea later in this video, but back then I had an understanding that before I move on to whatever I'm willing to do, I should try and learn the way how this community actually operates and see what I think of this particular medium. If you are on the YouTube for long enough time, and especially if this is your only channel you ever created, you pretty much start noticing that whatever you see as a content in your mind in the beginning does not naturally follow the public demand. And that's not a bad thing at a certain degree, it grounds your delusions, however it might pull away from making your own stuff at some point. I realized that my initial understanding of the niche I'm working in is slightly different from what I see in the YouTube analytics. Even though I am more or less guessed the typical viewer archetype of this channel and understood the general demographic fairly well, what I did not fully understand at first was what my audience actually values most. And I think one of the key things is time. So if I can save people time, the research time, reduce decision fatigue, or help them to get to the point faster, that is where the value really is in this niche. That is something I had not fully realized before some time in the past, because to be honest I was approaching it from a slightly different perspective. I saw it more as an open forum where like-minded people come together to reflect and share their experiences. And that was my misunderstanding, and this naturally affects the performance of different types of videos on my channel as well, because I also realized that there is a certain kind of content which performs much better in terms of views, and other content which does not necessarily do that well. For instance, this video I made somewhere in March last year is one of the videos I enjoyed making the most, and probably it is the worst performing video on this channel, and I understand why. This video was more about general knowledge and the broader cultural context. It is less direct and less practical, and that makes complete sense. And on the opposite side, the content sometimes enjoy less making gets more views. Not because it's better in some absolute ways, but it just answers the immediate need. But here we come to an observation, let's have a look. Over the last year and a bit, I managed to publish 17 videos. Out of those, 4 became clear outliers with more than twice the average views, and 5 in total performed above the channel average. So roughly speaking, around every third video I make has a noticeable impact on the channel's growth. On paper, that's not bad at all. An average of around 2000 views per video and a median of 1000 views is a healthy result for a small channel. So objectively, there is no much to complain. But what I started to feel is that if I continue working mainly on these kinds of videos that perform well here, and experts say that you should double down on whatever performs best, then I'm slowly moving away from the idea I had in the beginning. And I think that is the part that sits a little heavily with me. In attempt to find some time for my main ideas, I still have a couple of video projects that I haven't finished. For instance, the Full Rules review series for Rangers of Shadow Deep. I have some video material already on this channel, but I haven't scripted the rest of the episodes. I also have this other video I literally scripted last month, but it is still needed to be voice recorded and edited, and I will likely release this all along the way while I'm moving into the new thing. But recently I ran into something else, literally some weeks ago. One thing what I have noticed about myself years ago is that my motivation moves in kinda cycles. So sometimes I have these long productive periods where I can work for months without much resistance, and often after pushing too hard or too long, I hit let's say a rebound phase where I do almost nothing and just try to catch up. And last year was full of that as well. Some of those periods were longer, some shorter, but the last big motivational spree lasted from December up until late February, I suppose, and now I'm in this rebound state. All of this actually coincided with one really good occasion in my life. I have an old friend of mine with whom I have quite a history, and he invited me to his wedding as a best man in his home country of Hungary. Several hours before the ceremony, he asked my wife whether he could steal me for some time before he actually got married. So we went and sat in the main square in his hometown next to this church, and we had a talk like in the old times about global affairs, meanings, reasons, and all of this. And then he asked me this obvious question, the one I had heard many times before, even from him. What would I like to achieve in my life? And I don't know, something got me. Probably it was the right place and time this time. I tried to reflect inward and answer it honestly without any usual fluff. Because obviously, like any one of you, we all have our private goals and maybe larger ones if we are a little bit more ambitious. We all want to leave some sort of heritage to our children, to our community, to the world, whatever. But this time I caught myself thinking that, to be honest, one of my biggest fears and maybe one of my core goals is simply to live long enough. There are some health concerns and also some recent family events which triggered this kind of fears, but I don't want to go into details here because it's just too personal, but at its core, this question raised the concern of time. Same one my main audience has as well, because while still being in my mid-30s, I was not really thinking about it that much. But maybe I should. Another thing is that in my professional area, I also known for being thorough. I never leave a stone unturned, and that is what I also try to do within this YouTube blog. But when you are turning every single stone, you are spending time. And that was the realization that gave me a second perspective, combined with the idea that I'm starting to pull away from what I really want to accomplish, and I also understand that I cannot do things without proper quality, and I need to do them properly. That is my intention, and that is also just part of my character. And by checking every single corner for things I don't truly want to do, just because some YouTube algorithm says they will be valuable, while in the meantime I just keep drifting away from my original direction, I started to understand that I probably need to reconsider my action plan. So, where I'm headed with this channel? All my life I was somehow circling around the world building aspect, through stories, comic book attempts, and board game ideas. The desire to create worlds was always there. I was mostly searching for the right medium, and over time I realized that for me it needs to be something more physical than just the piece of paper. The last couple of years, and I suppose the last year in particular, showed me that skirmish wargaming is can be that kind of medium. It combines different forms, it has this benefit of handcrafting and storytelling and imagination and tactical thinking. It's physical, and its reach goes beyond just the play session. So this is where the channel pivots, and where I want to put more of my time. I have in mind the low fantasy medieval based skirmish game concept with the generative mechanics for replayability and story driven scenarios. During the last year or so, I have been thinking and taking notes about what I want to do and how this thing could look. I also have some ideas for cyberpunk skirmish scenarios. In that case, I may even use an existing rule set as a base instead of inventing everything from scratch. I have this Reality's Edge rulebook I bought a couple of years ago, so there are a couple of the mechanics I kinda like, so I probably could utilize some of that. So we'll see how it could work. I have also been reading and watching more about miniature game design. In particular, I discovered the Age of Carnage blog, and I'm currently reading their book, so the fundamentals of tabletop miniature game design. So on this channel I'm going to start sharing more of that game design process I will have and what I find along the way. That may include design thoughts on mechanics, ideas I would like your opinion on, and possibly things to playtest. I would also like to return to one of the initial original things I wanted to do, researching and generating some fiction around the ideas I pointed out. There is still a lot I don't know yet, including how any of this would eventually be released. Whether it stays as something self-published or goes through the publisher or ends up on a Kickstarter. I might even get some zines along the way. These are just thoughts at the moment and not commitments. At the same time, I still might finish some of the things I already started. I have a few unfinished video projects and I will probably release them along the way. I also bought this game I told you, the Guards of Traitor Stall. I have some shots filmed, but mainly I'm going through the miniatures at the moment, so I may end up actually reviewing this game along the way. But overall, this is where the channel is going to pivot, and as a brief aside for the other small creators, strategically the smart play is usually to pivot gradually. Keep the old format going, introduce the new one slowly, and adjust through analytics. I know that is the rational answer, but sometimes you reach a point where the more honest decision matters more than just the strategic one. This is not a complete genre switch when we are talking about the pivot. The range stays similar. What changes is the focus. So yes, this may affect views, subscriber growth, and maybe even lead to some people unsubscribing, but I think it is still right move for me at least. And if you play skirmish games or you have ever thought about designing your own, tell me what pulled you into it. And that's all for now. Take care.